Well, you said now after Grandma died that you had said Charlie behaved pretty well until after she died.
Yeah,
so.
he was pretty passive and pretty much did anything I suggested. And after she died, then his true personality came out, and he lied all the time to get extra money and to do drugs and to drink, and he would drink, and he didn't remember anything he did the next day. He was one of those kind of drunks. And that only happened about 4 times a year, but that was pretty bad when it did, because he was very embarrassing. And he'd get very, very angry. And he was very emotionally abusive, and just lied and lied and lied and lied. He was just a real con man. We went to many counselors, ministers, and counseled with many people, and nothing worked. He would tell them what he thought they needed to hear, and so it never worked. But anyway, we went to Jim's funeral after that. No, I talked about Jim's funeral already.
Yeah. Well, and I also, I think I just recall some of with everything else that had happened, but just some of the stress that you were going through, not only because of the difficulty of the marriage, but I also remember that, I think he was fairly demanding of you in certain ways. I remember, you were changing a lot of things about yourself. You tried to grow your hair out long, and you were pretty much running yourself ragged trying to lose weight. And
I'd go out at 5 in the morning and walk in the dark, and he just wanted me. I had promised him. I had lost 35 pounds when I met him, and I had said that I was going to get to my goal, and I was only able to lose 50 more pounds. So I got down to 185, and I just couldn't lose anymore. And I walked the treadmill, and I walked outside, and he would sit and eat candy bars and all this fattening stuff, and I was trying to diet, and he just demanded that I get that weight off, and I was just working so hard trying to lose that weight, and no more would come off. And then I started putting a little bit more on, and that's when he really didn't want anything to do with me. But yeah, it was an extremely stressful time, and my self-esteem was nothing. But after 6 years, 2004, I had a nighttime seizure. He took me to the emergency room, and they did a CT scan or an MRI or something, and found a nickel-sized scar tissue on the one side, right side of my brain. It said that they thought the seizure was caused by that, and I had been having some strange attacks every couple of months. And I'd go to my doctor, and I'd tell him that I felt really funny, about once every couple of months for a couple of days. And he'd give me neurological checks and never did anything else but just give me a manual neurological test in his office, and could never find anything wrong. But I found out afterwards that those were TIAs that I was having. The last two that I had, I was standing in line at the pharmacy to pick up some pills, and when I got up to the pharmacist, nothing would come out. I don't think I said gobbledygook, but I couldn't say anything, so I just backed away and let other people go. After a minute or two had passed, and I was able to get my prescription, and then the next time I was reading to Charlie in the Bible, We were sitting on the bed and I was reading the Bible, and all of a sudden he says to me, "What's the matter with you?" I must have been saying gobbledygook because he acted like I was nuts, and that just passed really fast, but those 2 times really scared me, and that's when I had the seizure. So I told them about those little attacks that I was having, and they told me they were probably TIAs because it caused the scar tissue on the right side of my brain. And I was under such extreme stress at that time. I'm sure stress brings things like that on too. I never did have another seizure. I was put on Dilantin for it and went to a neurologist, and he checked me for a long time, but I never had another one, and never told my job what happened either, because I had to drive on my job, and I wouldn't have been able to work my job if I couldn't drive. So I never told anybody, but that was, 2004, 2005, something like that those things happened. And then I had a hysterectomy and appendectomy. I had severe pain in 2005 in my abdomen, and I woke Charlie up and asked him to pray for me, and so he did, and the pain didn't go away, and I asked him to take me to the hospital because the pain was severe, and he complained and moaned and groaned that he was missing his sleep. He had to get up in the morning, and so I made him turn around and take me back home because I was so angry because he was being such a poop about taking me to the hospital that night. And finally the pain got so bad I had to let him take me back to the emergency room, and it took them till noon the next day to figure out what was wrong with me. Finally had a surgeon come in and check and realize it was my appendix. And then when they did the MRI, they found out that my uterus was, the lining was 3 times the size it should be. So they said, well, we got to take both out. So we're going to have an OB doctor do one surgery and the regular surgeon do the other surgery at the same time. So that's what they did. And I had to be in the hospital and had to stay home and relax and not do anything for 6 weeks. And it was the 5th of December, and I had company coming for Christmas, and I'd sit there for 5 minutes, and I'd get up and I'd work for 5 minutes, and I'd sit back down for 5 minutes. That's the way my days were, because I had to get the house cleaned, I had to get the baking done, I had to do this and this and this and this to get ready for Christmas, and so I was in so much pain. I mean, I had painkillers and Charlie was stealing them, and because I had to have them refilled quite often, and I wasn't taking all those painkillers, but I way overdid with that after that surgery and was in a great deal of pain. But I got everything done by Christmas. But yeah, I was a driven woman. But no, then by 2006, Charlie did it again. He got drunk, and he came home drunk, and he went outside. I went in the bedroom with the pets because I was scared of him. I shut the door, and next thing I know it's 10 o'clock at night, and the doorbell rings, and I came out and I peeked around the corner, and here's a policeman at the front door, and Charlie opened the door, and he said, "We have reports from the neighbors that you've been walking up and down the street in your underwear cussing." Oh, I was so embarrassed. I thought, not our neighbors. Oh, God. So Charlie talked his way out of that one and finally went to bed. It was just mortifying. And then the next time he got drunk, he said, "I want to go ice fishing with my buddy." And I thought, he doesn't like ice fishing. He's never been ice fishing. He has no reason to go ice fishing. But I knew that this buddy of his drank, and I knew that he probably just wanted to go up there and drink beer with the guy. But I couldn't stop him, so he went and told me he'd be home at a certain time, and of course he didn't show up. And about 10 o'clock that night, I get this call from the police, and he had been in a bar with his buddy and got in a fight with some guys, and they went outside, and his story was that they beat him up, and he got in the car, I guess, and the police finally picked him up, and he was so horribly drunk. And his buddy that he was ice fishing with just went home to Bismarck. I mean, they were up in like center fishing, ice fishing, or Underwood or someplace like that. And the police said, we have him here in the emergency room at the hospital. They said, we need you to come get him. Right now we've got him tied to a chair, and we have given him so much drugs to settle him down, and he is still resisting the ties that had him tied to the chair. They said, we can't believe how much drugs we've given him. And I said, well, he's a drug addict. He's resistant to the drugs. Takes a lot. And they wanted me to come and get him. And I said, there's no way. I'm scared to death of him drunk like that in my car. I'm not coming until morning. I said, can't you take him and put him in a cell and let him sleep it off? So they said they would. So the next morning I drove up and picked him up, and he was like a whipped puppy, just all repentant, and I didn't remember anything he did, and I just said, if you don't go to treatment, we're done. You got to get out of here. I can't take any more of this. So we went to Hartview. First of all, we had to go out to University of Mary and talk to Sister Thomas and tell her that he needed to go to treatment. She didn't even know he was married. He'd never told the administration that he was even married. And she said, well, of course you can take off time for this, she said, because, you know, it's like a sickness. Alcoholism is like a sickness, and we let people off for sickness, so they had no problem with it. But he was a janitor at the University of Mary at that time. And anyway, I should say that when I first married Charlie, he walked with a cane. He told me that he'd had his back broken and wired together years ago, and that he walked with a cane, and he was drawing disability checks. And they would have him come in for interviews periodically, like every 6 months, to make sure that he was still eligible to get those checks. And he was finally denied. And so he was offered a job at the Arrowhead Cleaners by Art Fody, his Christian buddy. And he threw that cane away, and he went to work at Arrowhead Plaza, the Cleaners. And he walked just like he never had a problem in his life, because he wasn't getting disability anymore. He figured he could forget the deception. And that just blew me away. I saw a side of him that I'd never realized before. But anyway, so then he ended up having a severe argument with Art Fody, because he worked for him at Arrowhead Cleaners. And they had a horrible argument out in the parking lot after working there a couple of years, and Art fired him, and he never spoke to Art again. And so that's when he got hired out at the University of Mary. I don't even remember what year that was, but anyway, he was a hard worker. I must say that for him. But anyway, I told him he had to go to Hartview. This was in 2006. And it was kind of cool the way it happened, because when they called me from Center and said he was in the, that I had to come pick him up the next day because he had been so drunk, I thought about Wayne Cease that I had gone with in 1974 when he had been an alcoholic. He'd gone to treatment, and I had had a few calls from him over the years, and I thought, I need to call somebody and talk to them and get some advice on what to do about Charlie. So I called Wayne after many, 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 many years. I knew he lived in Bismarck, and he was really, really good about, getting me connected with who I needed to call and stuff to get Charlie treatment. And he even, I said, I don't know if I can talk him into going for treatment. And he said, well, I'll send somebody over there, ex-alcoholic. And it ended up to be a guy by the name of Joe from our church that Charlie knew. And that was a God thing, because Charlie knew him and respected him and liked him. And he came over to the house and sat at the table with me and Charlie, and he talked Charlie into going to treatment. So God was really moving there, and but we had to go through some intense counseling, both of us, at Hartview, and the stuff was just really, really difficult. And he was fighting it the whole way and looking at me with daggers because I made him do it and stuff. And they told him at Hartview that he hated his mother, and he always claimed to love his mother dearly. And they told him that he was psychologically damaged, in other words. And he never did finish treatment. And finally, on May 15th, Mother's Day, that 2006, I don't remember what he did, but I just snapped. And I just told him I couldn't take it anymore, that he needed to leave. So we packed his things and left. And I never would have divorced him because I was committed to the Lord in that marriage, but he divorced me 3 months later. So I think he did it. I don't know if he did it for me or if he did it for himself, because he's lived with 4 or 5 women since over the last 10 years. He's continued to live with different women, but I've seen him a couple times since I got, in the past couple of years since I moved back to Bismarck, and he looks good. And I hope he's off drugs and alcohol, but I kind of doubt it. But he's certainly not practicing his faith anymore, which is very sad. And, but yeah, it's all a learning experience. I grew mightily in my faith through that time because God didn't approve of the marriage. I don't believe that he wanted me to, because it wasn't God ordained marriage, but he walked me through it and gave me the strength to persevere and sent the people in to support me and help me through it. So I'm so glad I'm single. I will never let a man do that to me again, or any other person. The pain and the stress and and because before I met him, I always said, when I heard about women who were abused by their husbands, I always said, what is the matter with them? Are they out of their mind? Why don't they just kick him out? I had no pity, but when you're married to somebody that you really love and they do that, you just cover up for them and you just put up with it. So it's not a pretty picture, but I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. So
the marriage ended?
Yes.
And
2006 summer.
Yeah. And by that time, me and my family had moved to Minnesota. Grandma was gone, of course, so that left you pretty much on your own in Bismarck. So
very lonely time, rattling around that big old house all by myself. Having troubles making ends meet because it was just my salary. Couldn't pay the taxes. I finally took out a loan and bought a decent car. I had sold my good car, and Charlie had bought me a $200 car. He had a good car, but he had bought me a $200 Oldsmobile to drive around. So I took out a loan and got myself a decent car and paid my bills that were past due. And now let's see what was going on after that. Oh, his sister Kathy lived with me for a year. She had come out from Washington, and we were going to help her find a job and start a new life because her sister Sally didn't want to take care of her anymore, and she was a drug addict and all that. And we made her get a job, and so when he left, she proceeded to live with me until the next summer. And she got an apartment. She had a part-time job, and she got an apartment. And I gave her all the furniture and all the utensils and dishes and everything she needed to set up housekeeping. And I think she lived in that apartment maybe 2 months, and then she decided to give everything away and move back to Washington and live with her son. So she came on a bus with 2 suitcases, and she left on the bus with 2 suitcases. But later on, years later, she died of cancer. So she was a nice lady, but very misguided. A lot like Charlie, but not like Charlie. So I did have her with me for a year after Charlie.
So eventually, well, we should say probably that part of the inheritance deal when Grandma passed away.
Yeah, we bought the house.
Was that you and Charlie bought the house?
Yeah, we bought the house from the boys. I paid them each $12,500 for the house.
And so by this time, you were able to sell the house.
In 2008, I couldn't pay the house taxes anymore. And Johnny and Barb even came back and tried to put me on a strict budget, and couldn't figure out why I couldn't make ends meet so I could pay the taxes so I could keep the house. And part of my budget was to pay tithe to the Lord, and they could not understand that. They said, you cannot afford to give. You have to use this money. And I broke down. I just said, I will give to the Lord. That comes first before anything. And I had such a tough time convincing them that that's how I believed and I was going to do it. And so when I realized that I could not make it and pay the house taxes too, and I was so lonely in that big old house, I knew that it just wasn't good. And so I prayed about it, and I told the Lord, you know, if I should sell this house, I want to sell it within 3 months, by the end of May. and the house sold in exactly 3 months. I put it, on the market the 1st of March, and it was sold, and I got the price I wanted for it by the end of May, and it was just a God thing. It really, really was neat.
So you were able to pay off your bills and do some traveling you wanted to do.
Yeah, that summer you came back and helped me pack up, and we moved back to your place with my things. I sold a great deal of the things. That was really hard. I wanted to be a missionary with all my heart. I wanted to be a missionary once I was out from underneath the house. That was my dream, and I had met some missionaries to the Native Americans up in Dunseith, North Dakota, and I had a vision that I was driving my little white car up to Bottineau area and taking stuff up to these missionaries, and after I started telling people about this vision that I had, they started bringing me all this stuff, and they filled up the whole garage with stereos and clothes and food and just tons and tons of stuff. And so 2 weekends on Sunday, I packed up my car with everything I could get in it after I'd met these missionaries that lived in Dunseith to the Native Americans. I packed up my car and took all this stuff that was in my garage up to them. And I got to meet the people and see their church, and they showed me around the housing area where the Native Americans lived, and I got to meet the little Indian children, and I was just fell in love with these little Indian children. I wanted to help them. And so anyway, I had their address, and I was sending them money every month to help with their ministry. And then after I moved out to stay with you, I went on a trip to the West Coast and spent 31 days and 5,000 miles. It was a dream trip that I'd always wanted to do. Did that, and that was wonderful. Lucy and I, all by ourselves, went to Butte, Montana to visit Charlie's daughter, and then down to Las Vegas to visit Rick and Becky, and then down to San Diego to visit Jean. At each place I'd stay for 3 days. Then I went to San Bernardino and picked up Robert, Charlie's brother, because he hadn't seen his sister Sally in many years, so he came with me, and it took us a week to go up the coast of California and went up to the Washington where she was living with her family, and we visited there for 3 days and had a blast, and we drove back to Butte, and by that time Sheena had had her baby, so we were able to see the new baby, and then we went to Bismarck, and he stayed with Charlie and took the bus back home later. But that was a once-in-a-lifetime trip. Really fun. But then I went to work at an assisted living place, Clay Ridge. If I ever get old and decrepit, that's where I'd like to live. Clay Ridge. I was thinking about that one night, and I thought, gee, it'd be nice to retire in that little place right by the lake. Anyway, so I worked at Clay Ridge for almost a year. That was nice because I did activities with the elderly, and that was right up my alley. I loved it. And yeah, anyway, so the next summer I ended up moving to Dunseith to help the missionaries, and that was another failure. I thought for sure that would work out. Moved to Bottineau. First I asked them if I could live with them, and they said no, they didn't have enough room in their house. And they had just gotten a big old church, and it was beautiful, but they wouldn't let me help Sandy Bean was her name, and the minister's wife, and she wanted to take care of and teach all the little Indian children all by herself in the basement while church was going on. They had teenagers, they had little tiny ones, they had all different ages of these Indian kids. They'd take the van out in the housing areas and pick up all these little kids. They'd all come running and want to go to church, and they'd feed them snacks and teach them about the Lord. And she wouldn't allow me down there to help with them. All I could do was help with music and clean the church, and that was so disheartening to me because I just had a heart for those children. And I'll never forget going down there. One of the little Indian boys was crying and crying at the door, and I went down and I opened the door, and she was over on the other side of the room teaching the children, and he was just crying. He wanted to go upstairs so bad, and I picked him up and I held him and talked to him and stuff, and she was just totally ignoring him. And the teenage kids were all standing around in the kitchen, not getting taught at all. And I just thought, what is going on here? You know, why won't she accept help? And so that turned out a catastrophe. So I remember being homeless for a while. I remember I was staying at hotels because I had money in the bank from the sale of the house. I was staying at hotels. One night I drove down to Bismarck and I spent the night in a tent in the Sibley Park with Lucy. And then I drove back to Bottineau, and I remember sitting under a pine tree with her. It was a very, very hot day. And I had driven earlier that day by this old house. It was a 100-year-old house right across the street from the post office in Bottineau. There was a for rent sign in the window, and I thought, gee, there's an apartment. So I got the number on it, and I called it, and it was the realtor, and he said, well, I'm up the lake right now. And I said, oh, I'd really like to rent that apartment. Well, you saw a sign in the window? This is God again, because there wasn't supposed to be a rent sign in the window because the apartment had just become available. They hadn't advertised it yet. But somebody had put that for rent sign in the window. And so he said, okay, I'll come to town and I'll show it to you. And so he came to town, and in the meantime, I was waiting in the park, sitting under a pine tree because it was so hot out, waiting. He called me and said, okay, you can come, I'll show it to you. And it was on the second floor of this old 100-year-old house, and there were 5 apartments in that house, and it was just a perfect little apartment, just fixed up really cute. And I said, I'll take it. And all I had, I didn't have anything but was in the back of my car. I had a cooler for a table, I had a lawn chair for a chair, and I had a air mattress for a bed, and I didn't care. I was happy. I just was so glad to have a place to call my own. Man, that was... But then I started searching around the back storeroom and stuff, and there was an old bed that had been left by somebody, and my cousin Margaret loaned me a table and a couple of chairs, and I purchased a recliner and had that brought up, and I had a VCR to watch movies, and it just was home. It was really nice. So...
And you got a job up there?
I didn't get the job until the next, let's see, it was probably, that was in August or 1st of September or something when I moved into that apartment. And I think it was the next spring when I got a job at the hospital and worked as a CNA at the hospital for a couple of years. And that was a good job, but it was a lot of work. It was like working in a nursing home, really fast-paced and stressful. But I liked the people, and I got along good with the patients and made a lot of good friends as the patients. And I started Bible studies. I had a Bible study at the Good Samaritan Home with the patients, and I had a Bible study at the Oak Manor, which was apartments, and then I had another Bible study at the hospital. So I had several Bible studies going for the elderly at that time, and that was very rewarding. I enjoyed that. And I started going to church at the they had a non-denominational church there in Botano that I went to, and there most of the people there were country folk that came in to town to go to church. They lived out on ranches and farms and stuff. But yeah, that was a good church. I taught Sunday school there.
And you ended up becoming the manager of your building you were living in?
They needed a manager for the apartment house, and so I took it so I could get, my rent was $300 a month, and it was $100 for being manager, so that was hard. I'd never been a manager before, and I wasn't a very good judge of people. I would interview people and trust that they said what they said was true, and I'd rent to them, and it'd end up not being good. So it took a while for me to get the hang of that. I finally ended up checking with the police on a few people, and I was glad I did, because I had one lady that was renting the main floor, and the cops came to the door and took her away in handcuffs, and oh my God, So, there were a lot of exciting adventures that happened there.
And you ended up having a little problem with your ticker while you were up there.
Oh, in 2011, I had a heart attack, October 5th. I wasn't expecting that. I hadn't been to the doctor in 3 years, and I wasn't on any pills at all, and I thought I was healthy, but I had a very stressful day at work the day before, and stress can bring on heart conditions easily. But anyway, so I was kind of silly about it. I think the heart attack affected my brain more than it affected my heart, because I had woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and once in a while that would happen, and I'd be wide awake. So I sat in my recliner and read, and all of a sudden I get this arm pain and chest pain, and I thought, must be heartburn. So I got up and walked around, and working in a hospital didn't help me any. But I had 5 attacks before 8:30 the next morning, and finally I took an aspirin because I wanted to go to my TOPS meeting. And so I went to my TOPS meeting because the aspirin made the pain go away. And I came back, and Jasper was in the apartment, and I thought, I think I'll go to Walmart, being the pain's gone, it must be nothing. And so I got Jasper and put him in the car, and it was a good thing I did, because I started driving to Walmart, and he was just all over me, crying and whining and crying and whining, and I thought he had to go to the bathroom. So I let him out, and he didn't have to, and I put him back in the car, and he just was goofy, just crying and whining. So finally I said, okay, I'll go to the hospital. So I took him back to the apartment and put him in the apartment, and then I drove over to the hospital. Did everything that they tell you not to do. And so they took me and put me in coronary care unit and hooked me up with IVs and did x-rays and blood work and all that. And I remember laying there, and I had called and I had asked my renter, Les Johnson, if he would go up to my apartment and get Jasper and take care of him for a few days, because I told him what happened to me, and he always liked my dog, and he said sure. So he went up and got Jasper and took him down to his apartment. I was laying there in the bed, you know, they had my pain controlled and IVs in and stuff. I was waiting for the results of the tests, and one of the ladies from work had gone home and changed clothes and came back and sat with me in the room just so that I'd have somebody there. And I said, I sure miss my puppy. And about 2 seconds later, Les walks in with Jasper. And Jasper jumps up on the bed and licks my face. And I thought, boy, talk about getting what you want immediately. And why Les thought about coming over there with Jasper, I have no idea, but he did. And so that evening they found out that I'd had a heart attack, so they shipped me by ambulance to Minot, and I was having some pretty painful attacks on the way. I had to get morphine, and so that they put me to bed, and the next morning they put a stent in and made everything all better. And I think I just stayed in one day after that, didn't I?
Yeah, it wasn't.
You drove out and spent the night in Bismarck, and then you came up and took me home.
Mm-hmm.
And got groceries and my pills and set me up in my apartment, and then you drove home. And I was in my apartment about a week, and I was raring to go back to work, and I called work and I asked them if I could come back on light duty because I couldn't stand being alone in that apartment. So they let me come back and make beds and do some light duty, and so I think after 3 weeks I went back to work regular. But then on December 31st, New Year's Eve 2011, I fractured my knee at work. So I went home and I was crawling around my apartment because the pain was so bad. I had gone to the emergency room with it, and they took an x-ray and said, well, maybe you pulled the muscle, you know, or something. Go home and rest it. And it was so painful. So I ended up going to Trinity in Minot and to a orthopedic doctor. And he did an MRI and found out, but that took till February to finally get to him. I mean, they had me going to physical therapy for my knee in Botano. They thought I had water on the knee. They were giving me physical therapy, and here I had a fractured knee. I couldn't get into the orthopedist till February, and then when he did an MRI and found out it was fractured, then I couldn't work anymore. And so by that time, it was, I was unemployed for 3 months. But fortunately, they had a program at the hospital where if you're just hurt or anything, they give you half your salary for 3 months or something like that. So that helped me out a great deal. And so...
So what led from that point to when you went out to live on the farm with Bev and Ed?
Well, Bev and Ed Daniels had bought a farm up in Devil's Lake with some of their inheritance from her mother when she died. They fixed the house. They gutted this white farmhouse out and made a really pretty house out of it, and just wanted a pleasure farm. And they called me up and said, why don't you come down to the farm and take a look? And so I went down and saw it, and they said to me, you want to come live with us? You know, as long as you're laid up and can't work, why don't you come here and live with us and help us out on the farm? Since I was an itty-bitty girl, I'd always wanted to live on a farm, so I thought, wow, this is a cool idea. So I prayed about it, and I thought it was the right thing to do, and talked to Margaret and Don about it, my cousin, and they said they'd help me move my things down there, so I gave away a bunch of my stuff and packed the rest, and Margaret and Don helped me move down to Detroit Lakes and to the farm. God, it's hard to talk about these painful things. That was so painful. They're, what do you call them? Jews
well,
for Jesus. They wannabe Jews is what they were, and they were fanatical and cult-like, and I didn't realize it. I knew what they practiced, but I did not realize the extreme that they went to. And they expected me to be just like them and to learn the Hebrew language and listen to their teachings. And when I tried to go into town to church at the Assembly of God church 10 days after I got there, he threatened me that he would kick me out if I did that. And that those people were, their Jesus wasn't our Jesus, and it was just so bad. Just scared the hell out of me, and he told me I was supposed to ask him anytime I wanted to go anywhere. And
yeah, he basically told you you were supposed to be under his oversight or whatever, in submission to him. And,
I was to be submissive to him, just as Beverly was. And he said that I was not to tell her that we'd had that conversation. So I was scared to death of him. I always loved him before that, but he scared the heck out of me, because I had given up everything to move out there and left everything I knew, and here he's threatening to throw me out. And
well, and I remember you calling me and asking me questions about the things he was teaching and saying.
Oh, I had so many red flags every time. And the one time I was asking questions, and Beverly said, just forget about the New Testament for a while, you know. And I, oh my God, what have I got myself into, you know. Yeah. That was so scary. And they put me to work. I was out there cutting trees and thinning bushes with Beverly, and here I had this fractured knee. I was supposed to be resting. I had a bedroom upstairs, so I had to go up these steps and down every time I went anywhere. I had to get out at 8 o'clock in the morning and do the chickens and carry a 5-gallon pail of water down to them. And it was March, and it was still cold and windy, and I was, you know, I had responsibilities that I had to do, and my leg was getting worse and worse and worse. My limp was getting worse. Yet I felt guilty because I was staying there, so I needed to do some work to help. I was doing the cooking. They told me I could do the cooking, so I did that. And it was just Saturdays we couldn't do anything. We didn't have, you know, other people to have a church service with. It was just the three of us because they were so fanatical, which I didn't realize. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with them. But finally, after about 6 weeks, I went to town with them to do some shopping, and we were on our way back, riding in the pickup. And we stopped to get the mail, and I had some bills in the mailbox, and I don't remember what the comment was that I made about the bills, and Ed just said, well, if you had not been living in a sinful state, you wouldn't have those bills, you wouldn't have to worry about it. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, you continue to work on Saturdays, on the Sabbath, and he just said some terrible things to me. And I just went home. We got home, and I went up to my room, and I cried and cried. I was so upset. Finally, I just got so angry. I went downstairs, and they were eating lunch together, and I just let him have it. I said, until you walked in my shoes and had to support yourself as a single woman, you can't judge me. And I don't even remember all the things I said, but Bev was just blown away because she didn't realize what he'd done or said to me. And finally she came upstairs after I'd gone upstairs, and she said, why don't you, I had told them, I'm leaving, I'm going to move out. And she says, why don't you just stay 6 more months and try it out? And so I proceeded to tell her all that he had said to me after 10 days, you know, about kicking me out and stuff. And she said, well, this isn't a concentration camp. He wouldn't say that. I said he did say that. And anyway, so I ended up going, I think it was Mother's Day. I went to Margaret's house, and Margaret and Don were both sick with the flu. So I asked them if I could stay for 5 days. And so I helped them out. I cleaned house and helped cook for them and stuff, and stayed for 5 days while they were sick. And I told them the situation of what had happened, and that I knew I couldn't stay there because they were always having overnight guests and stuff. So that's when I went to Bottineau, and I was going to tell my friends in Bottineau about what happened, and told my friend Carrie, and I said, pray for me, please. You know, I don't have any place to go, and to explain the situation of what had happened between us. And so I went to the hospital and told my friends there. And the last thing my friend Pete said to me before I left was, you know, when God closes a window, He opens a door. And I said, yeah, I know. And so I got this call almost right after I left the hospital from talking to them from Paulette from Menico, offering me a room at her house in the Turtle Mountains. And boy, that was a fast prayer. I mean, answer to prayer. And so I was able to get you once again to come back and help me by taking my things and out to store them at your house, and then I moved in with Paulette.
Yeah, you know, and when I came out to help you do that, I sat down with Ed and tried to talk to him and tried to help him understand the things he clearly did not understand about the New Covenant and the New Testament. And it was like talking to a brick wall. He just had no openness to the New Testament.
No, he didn't.
Yeah. And so,
I really believe they were cultish. I mean, they had gone to Solomon's Rest and were asked to leave. And Solomon's Rest pretty much believes the way they do, only they're way off to the left. They had stored all this food that they had collected. They were constantly buying food and storing it because they knew that a time would come when we wouldn't be able to buy food. And yet while I was cooking their meals, they wanted me to go down and use it because it was going to be outdated, all this food. And they had guns piled up because they knew they had to defend their lives against people that were going to come and try and take their things. And I just thought, oh my God, I don't want any part of this. This is scary.
They were preppers. I call them preppers. Yeah. Anyway, so you go up to Paulette's.
And that was a God thing too, because I moved in, and 5 days later her grandbabies moved in, who were 2 and 3 years old. Their daddy didn't want to take responsibility for them anymore. And their mother was a drug addict, so Paulette had to take guardianship of her grandchildren, and she was a midwife delivering babies and traveling all over North Dakota, checking women and delivering their babies. And so I, after 5 days of being there, when they moved in, I cleaned the house, I did all the cooking, and I took care of the animals and the gardens, and I took care of the children while she did her rounds and delivered babies in the middle of the night, etc., etc. We did that for 1.5 years, and that was a very neat experience because I got to live in the deep woods and right by a little lake and with a canoe, and And it's beautiful in the winter and gorgeous in the summer. She had 3 or 4 big gardens and tons of flowers and skunks, and heated the house with wood, and we had to carry wood in the mornings. It was freezing cold because the wood would be all burned up, and it was an experience I'm glad I didn't miss, but I'm glad I'm not there anymore.
Well, I do remember you calling me at some point and saying, I just don't think I can take another winter up here.
I'm such a social person that to be stranded for a week at a time because I couldn't get out was extremely hard on me. Extremely hard. And I was trying to live on my Social Security check was $700 a month and pay my bills, and you know, I depended on my credit card because I just didn't have enough money to make ends meet, and it got very stressful after about 1.5 years. I knew once my knee was healed up, I mean, she gave me a room on the main floor so I didn't have to climb steps, and my knee healed up quickly after that, you know, when I didn't work it so hard. But yeah, after 1.5 years, I told her, I said, you know, I'm going to go back to work, and I'm going to move back to Bismarck because that's my home, and I prayed about it, and this is what I've decided to do. And I said, I'll stay until you find somebody to replace me because I know you need someone to take care of the kids. And she said, you may as well move, she said, because it would take me a long time to find somebody to replace you. And so I think it was about a month or 6 weeks after that that I moved down August 2013 to Bismarck. And I've been here ever since, and I'm happy as a clam. So that was 2.5 years ago. I've been here. I called my job, and they said, you can come back at Home Health and Hospice. I had been gone for 5 years, and they still had a position open. And I called my friend Deb and Joe, and they said I could stay with them until I found a place. The first place I looked at was High Ridge North Apartments, and I put in my name, and the Lord got me an apartment here 3 months later. So I stayed with Deb and Joe for 3 months until I moved in here. And it was well worth waiting for because it was such a wonderful apartment and perfect prices when prices were sky high all over town. I found an apartment for $605 a month, which was unbelievable because of the oil. All the prices were so high. But yeah, it was a God thing, finding that apartment and being able to go to work for Home Health again. And I love my job. Not everybody can say that. And I appreciate them so much because at 64 years old to be able to be hired back on, that was really God. And found a wonderful church at Capital Christian Center Assembly of God. Very happy there. I feel like a spoiled child because he's just given me everything. And have much peace and made friends. Things are so much different than they were. Now I have a 2-bedroom apartment right across the hall, and boy, oh boy, oh boy, it's nice. Mike has a bed to sleep on when he comes to visit instead of the floor. Jasper's finally adjusted, haven't you? Come here. I'm surprised you're not begging to go to bed yet. See, look at the camera and say, hi. hello, hello. Hey, look at the camera. See, there's a camera there. Yeah? Hi. Hello. You're not being cooperative.
So anyway, during all those years that went by, grandchildren all grew up.
I guess.
Last year you got a chance to go back to Florida, and because Rick went back to school. And
yeah, Ricky graduated with his master's degree. I was able to fly down for a week and see him and his new wife Wendy, and see him graduate. And then Colin graduated from high school. And that was neat. And, was it the year before or 2 years before that Sarah had graduated?
She graduated in 2013, so
2 years. That was 15 when Rick and Colin graduated, so she graduated 2 years earlier.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And I've been out in Minnesota ever since 2002, and became a pastor out there. So. I don't know. Did we miss anything?
Oh, there's so much. The only way to know it all is to read my journals, because I have every day written down in my journals what happens, and everything's in those journals, but who wants to take the time to read them?
So, if you had something you could say to future generations who might watch this video, you know, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, whoever, so that they would know about who you were, if you had something you would want to say to all them, some kind of message to leave for them, what would you say?
That's easy. Just put your life in God's hands and trust Him with it. He'll give you peace to walk through anything. He'll hold your hand or even carry you through it. And tough times come and tough times go when you. The more He comes through for you and does things for you, the stronger your faith grows, and the next time something happens, you can walk through it with peace because you know He's there with you, and it's just nothing like the Lord. He loves His children so very much. And I feel very, very, very loved because every time I pray, He answers my prayers. And sometimes in spectacular ways that I don't expect. He's brought me through so many hard times and blessed me over and over and over again. I feel like a spoiled child sometimes because He gives me so much. And I feel very unworthy, yet by the blood of Jesus, I am righteous and holy, and will spend eternity with Him. And if you don't have Jesus, you don't have anything, because He's our strength. With Christ, you can do anything. He'll give you the strength. He'll give you the joy to walk through anything. If you just put your life in His hands and trust Him with it. Because He made us, so He understands us better than we understand ourselves. And we can't even start to understand how much He loves us.
All right.
My eyelids are heavy.
All right. Well, I think that's good. I think we got what we need. All right.
Is it off?
No.
Oh.
Do you have something else you want to say?
No.
Oh, all right. Okay, we'll sign off.